The miracles that solidified my faith. This one's a bit of a different one today. This is something that has been on my mind the last week or two, and I'm not too sure why, so I thought it'd be important to share. And I know that in the past, when I've brought up things like this, or when it's come up in conversation, that my friends or family or people are curious to know what kind of things led me to God, to my faith in Christianity and my relationship with Jesus, that I guess made it unique to me. I'll start at the start and I'll go through the two miracles in particular that stood out, because they're the ones that I think are the most blatant. I think they're the ones that you can never refute. You can't just coincidence them away, because there's a lot of coincidences when you pray. So anyway, I'll start with that. I grew up a Christian, going to an Anglican church. I always had a relationship with God, at least my version of a relationship. I'd pray, but I didn't really listen. I didn't really listen a lot, but I did pray a lot. And God still answered my prayers. I remember lots of times where things would happen and they just didn't make sense why that happened that day. And it would always help me and encourage me. And I had a very strong faith from a young age. And one thing that I wasn't afraid to do, which I think helped me, was to question things, because I believe it's really important to question things, because you'll either figure out why you do believe it or why you don't. And I think that's really important, particularly if this is something that you're going to live with or for. This is something super important. And otherwise, if it's not fit to be questioned, then why? Why is that? Why can't we go, well, what is this thing? That doesn't really make sense. And then you look into it more and you're kind of taking everything with a grain of salt. And then eventually you'll come up with your decision, eventually. There were times in my life where I wasn't as sure of my faith as I was when I was young. And they were in my older years, as far as like maybe when I was 20, 21, those sorts of things. There were certain things going on. I was quite down at the time, and there was a few things going on in my life that made it really tricky. But I'm going to give you the two miracles that really stood out to me. There's been so many, and there's been other ones more recent, but these are the two that I always go back to. My father, before he passed, he actually said, and it actually came out at his funeral during my mum's eulogy, that he grew up Catholic, and that's what you did. But you probably didn't practice too much. He didn't really practice when he was younger. And I think as he grew older and he went to different churches and different environments and he got to know God a bit more, and in our experience growing up, with our family dynamics and things that went on, he started knowing God for himself, not just what he was told. And it came out in Mum's eulogy how Serge, my dad, said, he's like, well, I can't argue with that. I saw it. I heard it. I was there. I can't argue with that one. Because he would try to explain things away, because that's what we kind of do. We kind of look for ways how it could have been a coincidence or how it could have been these different things. But that's not always the case. And there's a lot more coincidences when you pray. There's a lot more. This first story is the one that affected my dad the most, and I think solidified things for me way more when I was young. When I was about 11 years old, I was playing in the schoolyard with some friends, and I remember one of them jumped on my back and jumped on my shoulders, but then they kind of adjusted. And when they adjusted, my back between my shoulder blades went, and it just heard this pop, and it felt horrible. I didn't know what was going on, and I just dropped them. I fell down, they fell down, and I was trying to figure out what was going on with my back, because whatever it was not good. Couldn't figure it out, seized up really badly. And again, it was like 11 years old, so I was pretty young for that sort of thing to happen. I remember my dad, he picked me up from school, and I don't think we could get help locally because I'm from a small town outside of Mackay in Queensland. Kamala had like 100 kids in the school at the time, and there's no doctors around, so we could have gone to the next town up or so on. And I remember he said at the time, he said, look, because it might be something muscular, let's go check out this Bowen therapist he had just started going to, and he's found some success with it. And I didn't care. I just wanted to sort it out. Whether it was, probably a chiropractor or someone like that I thought could help, but I didn't know what Bowen therapy was. Anyway, went to this Bowen therapist, and she really helped. She helped with that sort of soft tissue massage. I could breathe properly again because I was a bit impacted. The pain had gone and I could move again and I felt a lot better. But in doing that, there's often these stipulations where it's going, well, once you've had a treatment, no running or jumping or strenuous exercise for 2 days, for 48 hours. And drink lots of water because there's the detox response. So make sure you're doing that, and try not to sit down for long periods of time. Don't just sit on the couch and watch TV because your muscles are a bit looser. You don't want them to seize up or set or anything like that. You just don't want it to be more painful and you need another adjustment because your muscles have kind of set a little bit more in a different way. Don't want that to happen. So anyway, and I remember we came home and I felt awesome and I was so encouraged by this. I'm like, this is great. This is awesome. And I had a basketball hoop in my yard and I love basketball. It's like my first love other than dinosaurs. Just loved it. That's all I wanted to do. And that's all I did every day was just play for hours. And I was like, I'm just going to get some shots up. And Dad's like, remember, no running or jumping. I'm like, no problem. All good. So I get the basketball, I'm dribbling, and I'm just doing form shots. Just standing there, working on my shot. And I felt really good and I was shooting well. And I was like, this is all right. So I'll just bend my knees a bit more. So cool, no worries. Did free throws and bending my knees a little bit more. And then I'm like, I'll just do little jumps, just tiny little jumps. And I started doing that. And then eventually, as you can see where this is going, very soon I was running, jumping, all this sort of stuff, playing basketball. And I remember one of the jumps, I jumped up and when I landed, something happened to my knee. I don't know what it was. I've never had it happen before or after, but it felt, the best way I can describe it was something moved in my knee. It didn't dislocate my kneecap. My kneecap was in the right spot, but it felt almost like something had gone over the top of my kneecap. So if that's the hinge there, something had gone over my kneecap so that when I bent, I could go like that. And then it was just extreme pain, could not bend my knee properly. So I'm hobbling off, feeling heaps of pain, but also feeling pretty bad that I just undid this thing that we drove like an hour to do. And sure enough, Dad was like, oh, what have you done? That sort of thing. And I told him what had happened and I've got tears in my eyes and the pain is immense. And it's like, well, it's 6 o'clock now. We can't do anything till the morning. We can't do anything till tomorrow anyway. And we've got Bible study tonight at our place. I was like, okay, sure, no worries. Well, obviously they would have been shut anyway and it's an hour drive. It wouldn't be good. So that night comes and by that point, I'm okay. I've got my leg up. So I'm not feeling the pain. My leg is straight. And I'm watching TV with my sister and there was this old comedy duo called Lano and Woodley, and Colin Lane and Frank Woodley. And it was awesome. And it was really funny. It was a great episode. We're watching it. I'm eating and we're watching that together as this Bible study goes on in the lounge room. And I remember I get a knock on the door and I think it's Mum. And she goes, Grant, would you like some prayer for your leg? And I was like, oh, I was actually going to turn it down because this episode was great. So thank goodness I didn't do that because that would have been very lame. But I said, yep, sure thing. I hobbled out and sat down on the couch and there's probably 7-ish people there, including my parents. So Lex was his name. And he was the pastor at the church that we used to go to back at that time. So this is like 97. So I was about 11 years old. So I'm sitting down straight. He picks up my legs at the ankles and he's sitting in front of me and he's like, there's about 1 inch or 2 difference with your legs. And we prayed and he was like, Lord, we pray for healing. And we're praying. It's completely silent in that room, completely silent. And as we're praying, I'm feeling peaceful. I'm feeling good. And then I hear an audible click. I hear an audible click in my knee. And at that time, even though we're mid-prayer, everyone's eyes opened. And he's like, did you hear that? I'm like, yep. And we finished the prayer and then put my leg down. And then he said, try bending your knee. And I picked up my knee and I bent it. I bent it completely and there was no pain. And I was obviously very shocked. Even though this is what I'm believing for, I was still shocked that it happened. And sure enough, the pain was completely gone. The movement was completely there. It was amazing. We had finished the prayer. My knee was able to move and he said, all right, stand up and then sit back down. Sit how you sat before. And then he checked my ankles and then my feet were the same length also. The gap, the difference between them was totally made right. And that was incredible. I was very shocked and super relieved and very happy. And that was really cool. That was really great to see. And I know that really stuck with my dad because he saw it and he heard it and he was there. So he gave him something really tangible to hold on to. And for me also, from then on, I'm like, I can't argue with that. Like, I experienced that. I was there, I heard it, I saw it, I felt it. It was me. So that was the first one when I was 11. Now, the second miracle that happened that really solidified things even more so was something that I think I never really gave the full credit to until well after it was done. And the stakes were way higher too. The first instance was my knee, but this one was my life. So when I think I was 17 or 18, I think it was the first year out of school. First year out of school, I've moved to Mackay. Everyone's got their 18th on. Every single weekend, there's someone else's 18th over in Australia. That's when you can legally drink. And so there's lots of parties, and that's all happening. So every weekend, there's someone else's 18th on, and there's always something on. At that time, I was on a medication where I couldn't drink, and it would disrupt the medication. So I was like, oh, I'm not going to do that. That kind of sucks. I couldn't drink for like 10 months or something like that at the time. And that was peak hour. That was peak hour drinking time, was your 18th. But I couldn't drink because of my medication. And I remember coming home from a party from the other side of town towards where I lived. Now, there was a particular street near where I lived that is very dark, very, very, just really scarce sort of overhead streetlights, just really spread out. So there's just something and then nothing for ages. And I remember there's traffic lights, there's a crossing, a four ways sort of thing. And I remember I was okay. I wasn't tired. I was awake enough. I wasn't struggling, but it was about 2 a.m. It was very, very late. And I remember I stopped at the traffic lights and I felt very peaceful. I remember the lights were red. I'm sitting there and there's nobody around. There's no lights in any direction I can see. I'm the only car on the road, and I have been for the past 5 or so minutes at least. And I remember the traffic lights go green, and it's hard to explain whether I heard or felt a voice, but it was audible. Like, it was very clear, and it was very casual. It just said, hang here for a bit, and that was it. But I'm not sure whether I heard it or felt it in my chest. Or maybe both. Maybe both. I can't. It's hard to explain. It's very hard to explain whether I felt it or heard it, but I know I at least felt it. But it was audible. It wasn't. It's so difficult to explain, but the voice said, hang back a bit. So I didn't go. The traffic light went green, and then it was about 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. It was about 2 or 3 seconds. After those 2 to 3 seconds, on my right, a car sped through what was their red light, completely sped through the light, going something ridiculous. I don't know what speed they were going, but it was something ridiculous because they weren't on my right before, and then suddenly they sped through. And in Australia, our steering wheel is on the right-hand side of the road, so it sped through the light, and I watched them go. And then I went, huh. And then I felt peaceful, and then I drove through. I remember not really having it sink in what just happened because I was peaceful and I was like, oh, that's good that I didn't get hit by that car. But in hindsight, when I eventually thought about it, I was like, at that exact time, about 2 to 3 seconds, the way I was driving, I would have been dead middle in the middle of that crossing, in the middle of that traffic light. And they would have hit my right-hand side where I was. And going how fast they were, I would have thought I would have easily died. And to have that voice tell me to stay put in a very calm way, not to panic me or to frighten me, but it was very calm and casual, very chilled. That saved my life. And I don't think I ever really fully reflected on that to that extent, the kind of gravity of the situation, until maybe a year or two later. I don't think I really gave it the importance that it was. It saved my life completely. So that was something that I've taken with me as well. And then again, in hindsight, the more I've learnt about God and experienced, is that I find, in my experience, God kind of communicates to you, or to me at least, kind of in your tone, kind of in your own tone, because he's trying to relate to you in your way. So if I'm a super intense person, he's probably going to speak to me quite intensely. If I'm a blunt person, he'd probably be more blunt. Some of those things at different times. Personally, I think that he speaks to you in the way that you're going to listen most at those particular times. So at that time, I was really chilled and tired and calm. And he spoke to me in that voice and in that tone. I was very calm. I was very chilled. And he spoke to me in that way. He just said, hang back a bit. And I've never heard him say, hang back a bit since. But that was something that if I didn't do what was said, if I didn't do what he told me to do, I'd most likely be dead today, because I would have been about two seconds into that. I would have been right in that path of that car. That car would have been doing at least 160, at least, I would think. Maybe more. It was screaming along. But yeah, at least between 160 and 200. It was absolutely flying. And I think because it knew that it was the only car on the road. It was 2 a.m. It was between 2 and 3. And it was the only car on the road. There was no one else around. It was just an absolute ghost town. But if I didn't listen to that, and if I just went with what I saw a green light. Green means go, drive. If I just went off my own power, my own responsibility, what I saw with my eyes, I would be dead. And God saved my life that day. And I can't argue with that. Again, I can't argue with that stuff. That's something that I experienced. So these are stories that came to mind recently. And maybe it's to encourage someone, is that maybe it's something you have seen and experienced, and maybe you've rationalized it away and you've gone, oh, maybe that was someone else talking to me. It's like, all right, dude. So who knows if you're trying to rationalize this away? But for me, I can't argue with that. I can't. And I just wanted to share the 2 miracles that really affected me, that really helped me walk with God in a way that I can't argue with. I just can't do it. So there you go. That's me. That's the 2 experiences that I had in my younger years, and there's been a lot more since, but those are the 2 that had almost movie-like experiences. You know, the audible click, and there's people around, and then the voice that tells you what to do. It's almost like a movie, but that's what happened, and I can't argue with it. So that's me. All the best, and I hope you're doing well with whatever you're doing. If you have any questions for me, just sing out. Just add a comment, DM me, whatever it is. Just ask a question, and if I can help in any way, I will. And I'll talk to you soon.